Okay, next we have administrative business. Item number 7, report providing an update on the Linden Avenue Park project, project number PK2305.
Great, good evening. If you can flip to the next slide. So good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. Philip Vitale, Deputy Director of Capital Projects. This evening, we'll be presenting an update on the new park at Linden and Pine Avenue, which I'll start by providing some history of the sites, funding sources, and the composition of the project team. I'll hand over the presentation then to Aubrey Kuhl, who's an environmental scientist with Nino and Moore, who will walk us through in past environmental investigations and findings that deem the site safe for development as a park. Jan Eastland with MIG Design and Community Outreach will then walk us through the community engagement process of the past several months, as well as upcoming opportunities for the community to continue to engage in the design of this park. So next slide. And next slide. So a bit of background. So the Old Town neighborhood was identified in the 2015 Park and Recreations Master Plan and the 2022 General Plan as areas of concern for their lack of parks and open space. To address this need, City Council has provided direction and allocated funding to develop both 616 and 700 Linden into a park. So both sites were owned by the former Redevelopment Agency of California and were conveyed to the city with restrictions on their future use. Although the long-range property management plan identifies high-density housing as the highest and best used, the city is moving forward with park development to bring much-needed additional park space to the Old Town neighborhood. I'd also like to point out that as a separate project, the city is exploring the use of CDBG funds to improve ADA access to the Cypress and Pine Park, which will better position that park for grant funding to do future park improvements.
Through the mayor, pardon me, Phil, can you underscore that again? So if this is not developed as a park, it will be what?
The highest and best use is for housing.
So housing, so another probably 7-8 story in the mid-smack of Linden and Pine.
Most likely. Thank you. Great. So next slide, please. So a little bit about the site there. So the 616 Linden Avenue property is a 0.32 acre site that's currently a parking lot. An automotive repair shop operated there into about the early 2000s. The 700 Linden property is a 0.34 acre vacant vegetated lot. Both properties front Linden Avenue and are bisected by Pine Avenue, with 8th lane to the north of 700 Linden and 7th lane to the south of 616 Linden. Next slide. A little more background. So the design and construction budget for the park at Linden and Pine is $5.5 million. Sources include $3.2 million from the State Department of Parks, $1.3 million from park fees, and $1 million from developer contribution fee from the IQHQ development. In late 2022, the city engaged environmental consultants Nino and Moore, and in 2023 engaged MIG to conduct community engagement and design. So subconsultants to the project also include BKF Civil Engineers and Hexagon Transportation. With this team, the city conducted a thorough investigation of the sites, including soil conditions, utilities, traffic analysis, and emergency access, all prior to presenting designs to the community to be sure that the sites are suitable for development as a park. And now I'm going to pass it over to our environmental scientist, Aubrey Kuhl, to walk through the environmental conditions.
Thank you. So I'll take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Aubrey Kuhl, a principal geologist with Nino and Moore. I'm a state registered professional geologist. I have 26 years experience as an environmental consultant here in the Bay Area. The last several years, I've been specializing in redevelopment projects, including affordable housing, mixed use, residential commercial developments, and park spaces. And then before I was working in redevelopment, I worked almost exclusively on underground storage tank cases. I'm the project manager for this project. Next slide. And one more. Thank you. So this is a historical photo, and it shows the former auto repair shop, and that is located at 616 Linden. Next slide. So that brings us to the underground storage tank case, again at 616 Linden. So, I wanted to point out all this environmental information that I'm presenting is available on the city's website, and there is a link to the state database GeoTracker as well on the city's project website for the park. So the auto repair shop at 616 Linden had 2 underground storage tanks, one containing gasoline and one containing waste oil. And those were removed back in 1993, and an environmental case was opened by the county. Petroleum contaminated soil was removed in 1993, and then additional investigation continued. The county was satisfied with the remediation and the investigation that happened, and they closed the case back in 2001 and required no further action. Next slide. And the next slide. So back in 2021, the city wanted to find out if there were any environmental issues associated with developing these 2 parcels into a park. So a phase 1 environmental site assessment, which is a record search, and a phase 2 environmental site assessment, which involved collecting soil and soil vapor samples, were completed. So these investigations concluded that there are no environmental issues associated with 700 Linden, which is currently a green space. At 616 Linden, they found a buried concrete structure, which was one of the photos on the previous slide, and they found some petroleum contamination and lead concentrations in soil and soil vapor. Next slide. So these photos just show site investigation that happened on the properties. One is showing a drill rig, and then the other one is soil vapor sample collection. Next slide. So Nino and Moore started working on the site in 2022. Our objective was to determine whether it was safe to develop 616 Linden into a city park. So first we reviewed all the historical data that we've just talked about, and then our next step was to involve the county. We wanted to make sure that the scope of work that we developed and the evaluation of the results that we got satisfied the county's requirements. We conducted soil sampling in 2023 and then earlier this year, and the results show that soil conditions at 616 Linden meet residential requirements, and so it is safe to develop that property into a park with no additional work or investigation. So that said, the city does want to voluntarily remove some lead-impacted soil that exists at 3 to 6 feet below grade, and that's in that buried concrete structure that we were talking about. So we will propose that work in what's called a site management plan, and we'll submit that to the county for review and approval before park construction begins. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jan with MIG to discuss the community engagement and park design.
Thanks, Aubrey. Let me see if I can get the hang of this. Okay. Well, the whole point of this process is really to create this vibrant new community space for the community of Old Town. And so to do that, we know that it's important to have a strong community engagement plan. So that's where we started, and we began with the project team and city staff really laying the groundwork for this engagement effort by looking to some key community members. We interviewed them to find out what are the locations, what are the ways we can engage with the community that will really work best for this community and this project site. So that's what we called phase 0 here on the timeline. And then also during this time period before we met with the community, we did some studies and reviews to really understand what's feasible for the site and what we can do here to make it a park. So we looked particularly at circulation, and we did a traffic analysis by Hexagon, who are here tonight to answer any questions. And they looked at what are the impacts if we did want to close Pine Avenue to create a connected park, would there be traffic impacts and things like that. And then we also met with the fire marshal, the engineering department, and also garbage and recycling services, that's SSF scavenger. And all of those meetings led us to options that were feasible, and those were the only options we presented to the community. So after that, in spring, once we had sort of this technical background done, we started meeting with the community, and we started the visioning phase. And we held 2 large open houses that were in person at the site. And we got a lot of good community feedback. There was a lot of enthusiasm about building this park. We heard from the experts, the neighbors, about the past of the site, and then we also heard what they wanted to see in the future. What were their goals? What were their priorities for this new park? And then we also had a separate meeting with the merchants that live around the area, or that have businesses around the area. And we had a meeting with them to really understand what their concerns were. There's issues like parking, loading, activation, and customer experience. Those kind of things were discussed separately with them, so we made sure that this plan worked for everyone, both residents and business owners. And all of these events were, the materials and the events were done in both Spanish and English. We had Spanish translators on site at the in-person events, and there was a variety of outreach methods to really spread the word about these events. The city did mail, they did, let's see, I think they did hand-delivered flyers, that's right, and also e-blasts, and there was also a kiosk put out at the site so that it was very apparent that there was a process going on, and there were flyers posted for people to understand what events they could attend. So early on, we vetted some of the circulation options that had come through our earlier studies. So we first, we presented these 3 ideas, but before we did present them, we made sure that the fire department had approved them, and they said that there was no change in emergency response time. That was important that we made sure of that before sharing them. And out of these 3 ideas, the top-ranked idea was joining the park together and having a hammerhead turnaround at Pine Avenue. So that was the top rank, and then the next 2 were kind of in a tie. They were joining the park, but providing an alley connection from Pine Avenue to 7th Lane. And then the 3rd one shown at the bottom there was a separated park with a speed table.
Sorry, through the mayor, can you underscore that one more time? So even before these were presented as options, you had conversations with our fire department, South San Francisco Fire Department, that gave you, yes, the thumbs up to make that an option. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that I'm hearing right.
Both the fire department and also the traffic study had also shown that it was, all of these options were completely feasible.
The traffic study by the city traffic engineers, I imagine?
No, it was by a separate consultant, Hexagon.
Okay, thank you.
And then at the same time, we were listening to comments and hearing from people that their top priorities were to slow traffic and provide safety for children and seniors in the new park. So between hearing that and hearing concerns about how people were going to cross the street if the park was in 2 halves, we really decided to prioritize connecting the park in the interest of everyone. And additionally, in the vision phase, we went through several efforts to understand people's priorities. And here you can see that people's top priority for the park is play, followed by gathering, events, and art. And we also developed some key takeaways based on what we heard from the community. And in short, they really just want an active, safe community space that they can all enjoy. So after finishing the visioning phase, we looked at all of our information. We did a full summary of this, and it's online as well. And then we came up with 2 design alternatives based on what we heard. So we have 2 concepts that both are inspired by traditional plazas around the world that really have become the heart of their communities, and that's what we see the citizens here wanting for their community. And both of these concepts represent people's priorities in different ways. Both of them do have a connected, safe park, and they have different circulation solutions. We heard early on from the merchants that parking was a priority, so we made sure to include some parking in both schemes. And you'll see that neither one of these do include a restroom, and that's started based on neighborhood parks not typically having restrooms and a budget that we wanted to stretch for amenities. But now that we've done a lot of outreach, we're understanding how important that is to the community. So we're taking a look at how we can explore fitting in a restroom in and what kind of trade-offs that might create. So as I said, both of these concepts include the priorities of the community, but in different layouts and in different amounts and ways. So option A is really more park focused. It has more green space and a smaller plaza. For its circulation, it creates an alley between Pine Avenue and 7th Lane, and then that connects you back to Linden. For concept B, it's really more plaza focused with the large plaza. And then for circulation, it creates that hammerhead turnaround at Pine Avenue. And so once we had these two concepts, we took those back to the community and had an even larger list of events to really vet them with the community and find out what they liked and didn't like about each one and what the priorities were. So we did these 8 in-person events and then also an online survey. And at these events, people were available to speak in both English and Spanish and take down comments, and then also help people through the online survey. At the events, we had iPads available, so you didn't have to have your own device, but you were also encouraged, if you wanted to tell your friends and family, to do this at home on their own computer or on a phone. It could be done at any time during this 6-week window. And you can see that we got a good amount of participants. People were excited, and we got over 400 people involved in all of these events. And the initial results are that both concepts were really well liked. They both scored, when rated separately, 4 out of 5. And then we did kind of a side-by-side comparison question that you see on the screen. And they were very close, with concept B coming in on top at 47% and A close behind at 44%. And then the smaller section, 9%, is people that wanted a combination of the two. And then the survey really got into a lot more detail, all of which will be summarized online. So I'll just share a couple slides with you here tonight. This one shows what are the top rated features for each of the concepts in order. And then we also developed a key list of takeaways. What we were starting to hear kind of over and over from people. And what we heard was to balance the plaza size with the other elements, not make it too large. It's important, but don't make it at the expense of the other elements. And that we can use Linden Avenue if we have an extra large event. People also thought we should create a flexible lawn that can really host a variety of events, so anything from picnicking to a very small casual sport. People would like to see a variety of types of seating, tables, and shades spread throughout the park, not just in one area. And the play area should be inclusive and should also be visible and connected to the other areas of the park. And lastly, we need to ensure that the artwork really reflects the community's identity and its heritage. So after this check-in tonight, our next steps in the process are going to be to finish that full engagement summary of the Phase 2 alternatives, and that will be posted on the city's website. And then we'll also go back and review our technical aspects, things like civil engineering, utilities, and costs, and check in on those things. And so the two together, the technical aspects and the community input, will be used to come up with that final concept. And that final concept will be shared in the early winter with the public in person and then also on the website. And I think I can say for everyone here that's been involved in the process, we're just super excited that we've come this far. We're just kind of checking in with you with what we've done so far. And we're really excited to take the next step to make that final concept and then get this park a reality. So that's it, and thank you for your time, and we're up for comments and questions.
Thank you, Jan. Just one more thing. So thank you both, Jan and Aubrey, for your information here tonight. And I think Jan summarized sort of our next steps really well. And then I just want to point out, while that concludes our presentation, I'd like to note that in addition to having Jan and Aubrey here, who presented this evening, we also have Jacob Madden, who's with San Mateo Department of Public Health. He's here to help answer some questions that might come up from council. And we have Christian M. Anzeld with BKF Engineering. He's a civil engineer. He's available remotely to help answer questions. And then Noella and Jose Leal with MIG can continue to help answer questions about the community engagement process. And then we also have Tricia Dudalaw with Hexagon Transportation Consultants, who helped develop that transportation study to answer further questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Maybe the District 5 council member should lead off.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. There's a lot of information there, so I think we owe it to ourselves to break it down into pieces so people really understand and synthesize what this looks like. If you could bring up, if IT staff can indulge me and bring up the additional work voluntary slide in terms of the additional soil testing. So I want to emphasize what I'm perceiving and I'm understanding, just so that the community can understand. So it was determined that you said required no further action. Can you explain what that means when something is, after you test it, the results come back and it says requires no further action?
Yes, so what happened is an actual environmental case was opened with the county public health department, the groundwater protection program. And so they oversee the work and they direct the work. So I think we're actually a couple of slides back. This is the underground storage tank case where this is required by a regulatory agency based on the findings, right? So they pulled tanks in 1993. They took some samples and they said, oh, we've got some petroleum hydrocarbon contamination here. So this case was opened. And then they go through the process, and all of this work is directed by the county. And then at the end, when the county is satisfied that everything has been taken care of and it no longer poses a significant risk, then they close the site, and they say that no further action is required. So that's officially closing the case, and there's no additional work that needs to happen.
And is that then can be interpreted as being clean?
Yes, it's interpreted as, as being clean. There are some notes. If the site use changes, it needs to be revisited, and then that's the voluntary process that the city has been embarking on.
So in 2023, 2024, after it was clean and deemed clean, there was some lead found. Is that correct? And the lead was potentially okay, but the city is now voluntarily going beyond what is required and saying, no, even if it's okay to leave a little bit of lead, we're going to take out all that lead and we want it completely clean. Am I interpreting correct?
That is exactly correct. So in 2021, the work that was done with the EPA grant found that there's this buried concrete structure. It's 3 feet down. And then within that structure, there was some soil and some metal and different things. They're not sure what it was that they found. Inside that, there was some elevated levels of lead. So this work that we did then in 2023 and 2024, we collected samples in shallow soil all across the site, and we didn't find any concentrations of lead that exceed residential criteria.
And then these findings, toxic soils or disclosures, are they available to the public? are they being withheld in a certain confidential sealed envelope that nobody can read them and it's only for you guys to figure it out? Is there a withholding of disclosures?
No, so we did a couple of things. One, in involving the county, when we got involved with the project, we submitted a work plan to the county, and anything that we submit to them, they upload to GeoTracker, so it's publicly available. So when we did, I don't remember exactly the date, but in 2023, when we proposed this work and did the work plan, they posted it on GeoTracker. It's publicly available. And also I just found out, because I was looking online, that the report that was done by the EPA is also on that GeoTracker website. And then the city asked us to help and put together a comprehensive environmental report, because it's kind of hard to get bits and pieces from all these different reports that also involve some other sites, not just these 2 sites. So we put together a comprehensive environmental report that has all the data tables and shows all the samples that were collected, both at 616 and 700, and that is available on the city's website.
And this information had been available since the soil testing had been completed prior. It wasn't manipulated, it wasn't rushed, it wasn't like, oops, we forgot to do this, let's do a test.
No, like I said, as soon as we involved the county, all of the work on this underground storage tank case has been available since they put all their records online. They've always been available at the county offices, but then they've hired, an intern was hired, I think, at the water board, and they put all of these things on the website. So that's been up there. I don't know when that happened, but I think in the mid-2000s. So all of this historical data is available on GeoTracker. And then again, the work that we did, we submitted a work plan and the report to the county. So that's on GeoTracker. And then that document done by the EPA is also up there. So as things happen, they post it.
So, ma'am, as a state registered geologist and also project manager, would you say that this site is clean from toxic and is able to be used and built as a park for children and families without exposing harm or death to families or children?
Absolutely.
And this is from you as a state registered, as well as the county and as well as the city. So it's 3 entities backing that up?
Yeah, what we did was we looked at, there are state criteria for these underground storage tank case sites. And so those are the criteria that we looked at. So we got the data and I compared the numbers that we had to what's allowable in this state. It's called the low threat underground storage tank case closure policy. So this is across the board, across the state of California, at sites that have underground storage tanks. They all use these same criteria, and that's what we used. So the soil at 616 Linden is fine. It's absolutely safe. The soil meets residential requirements, and so it is safe to use as a park. Residential use is more sensitive than a park use. So residential assumes that someone is there in contact, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 50 weeks a year for 26 years. So that's the level.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Through the mayor, if I could bring up our fire chief, Chief Sampson, I wanted just to confirm and ask you, I know that the team here spoke with you prior to developing the options here, but can you give us a sense of what you evaluate in terms of this option, or it's called T intersection, I guess, or hammer intersection? There's rumblings saying that residents could potentially be trapped in an emergency situation, that this is hurtful and very dangerous for the community in terms of emergency services. Can you please give us your take on this?
Yes, and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. Matt Sampson, your fire chief. So when we look at a project like this, we evaluate a couple different items. One is going to be ingress and egress of emergency vehicles to a scene. We want to make sure our response times are not going to be hindered. And with the access from both, mainly from Cypress, but also Airport Boulevard right into Pine, we don't see any measurable difference in the response times for that. And the next piece is we look at ingress and egress from the residents, should we have to have anyone basically evacuate. And when we do look at evacuations, we never like to funnel people into the center of town. Linden will become very jammed with cars as people try to come from both sides of Linden, both east and west, as they funnel down either north or south. But with this street here, the way it is, Pine can go right to Cypress, Pine can go right to airport, and then they have access right to the freeway to go north or south, which is a much more desirable pathway for evacuations.
So as a sworn-in public safety chief here in this city, you sign off and are okay with this design?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Wanted to ask you, Philip, that's all my questions. Thank you. Philip, just wanted to go back to, in terms of the way that engagement was done. So was there any way where the city or any of the staff influenced one option over another option, or pushed it to be because of cost or anything else in that way?
No, I would say, as far as I'm aware, there was no leading anybody to make a decision. We really wanted to share what the various options were and help people understand what they could get from the spaces and the trade-offs of each of these. So,
and then just going one more time, so it has to be deemed for public benefit, this space. If we were just to halt this completely and pause it and not move forward, it could potentially then, like we've said earlier, be built into housing, right? Both sides, right? And not just one side. So two side-by-side twin towers, if you will.
yeah, they could, the designated use would be for housing.
Okay. The last thing, Greg, if you could come up, thank you. I wanted to double check on what the park itself, I know that they mentioned about restrooms. When I met with merchants, and I think some of them are in the audience, it was very important that they said that we include a restroom because they didn't want to be the bearers of all those individuals that would be coming into their businesses asking for restrooms, et cetera, as well as they said lighting, as well as potential, security measures and stuff. Can you explain to us if that is something that's going to be incorporated, if it's standard? There's a lot of issues that people are perhaps afraid that there's going to be a lot of loitering during the evening, the night, et cetera. Can you address some of that, please?
Yeah, certainly. I'd like to say when we started design, we considered what is typical for a park of this size, and typically there would not be a public restroom. However, I think it's a good example of how we pivoted, listening to community members, and particularly merchants in this case, that there was a great desire to have that amenity. And so now we are starting to study how we can work that into the program. There will have to be some trade-offs because we do have a fixed budget. So it will be working with community members to understand, if we do a restroom building, this is what the trade-off would be. And sort of let the community decide that.
And I know that at Orange Park, there's lighting that happens at night, right? For security purposes, would that be the same case here? It wouldn't interrupt, let's say, neighbors that are next door. They'll be able to go to sleep fine, but it's regular lighting around the park.
Yeah, as part of the design, we would have photometric studies done to make sure that it is appropriate light level for public safety, for users, but doesn't impact the neighborhood so much.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's all the questions. I'll have comments after, Mr. Mayor, but that's all I have right now.
Sure, thank you. Any questions from my colleagues?
I do. I think Vice Mayor Flores kind of asked all my questions, but let me see if I can try to connect the dots here in terms of the environmental study, because there was some language there that I kind of need some clarification. I think Vice Mayor Flores, started the process. So the county closed the case in 2001. I understand that. But then when we voluntarily converted the land, we looked into the sample soil. But when we looked at it, it said, on the slide, it said 616 found metal in the soil and gasoline chemicals and soil vapor that exceeded Regional Water Board residential screening. So I guess I'm trying to understand here and just kind of dig down a little deeper here in terms of the study. If the county closed the case saying it was environmentally safe, but then we ended up doing our own environmental study and we find that there is some contaminated soil, why is there a disconnect with the soil samples here? I'm not a scientist, so I don't understand. And I think that's a question I think a lot of the residents here are asking.
Yeah, so I guess it kind of comes down to what is clean and what is contaminated. And so it's kind of not a yes or a no answer. So sometimes you have residual contamination at a site. So when they closed it in 2001, you very rarely get to the point where it is absolutely completely clean, but you get to the point where it is clean enough that it doesn't pose a risk.
For the current usage of the
Yeah.
property. Okay.
And so, let's see, I think you're talking about this slide. Okay.
Yes.
So, the slide at the bottom, so it says that there are no issues at 700 Linden, and then it says there's diesel and lead in soil and gasoline chemicals in soil vapor
Right.
that exceed waterboard screening levels. So we collected a total, and then we did additional work, right, in 2023 and in 2024. So of all the samples that we collected 17 samples and analyzed them for diesel. One sample that was collected in 2021 exceeded the waterboard screening levels. The other 17 did not.
So because we were converting the property to a park, we had to do additional testing in terms of the usage for the sample soils. I guess I'm still trying to connect the dots. Wouldn't the county?
In what happened in between? Yeah, so the case was closed, so the county was no longer requiring that work was going to be done. But the city wanted to make sure that this was safe, and it's a change in land use, and so the city wanted to make sure that everything was okay, and so that's why they did these phase 1 and phase 2 assessments.
Okay.
So there was, again, the lead that was found was in that buried concrete structure. And then of the 17 samples that we've collected, diesel exceeded waterboard screening levels in one location out of 17. And I will say, there are, almost every agency has different screening levels. So the Department of Toxic Substances Control has a screening level. The Water Board has a screening level. And then we have the state underground storage tank levels. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, this gets really technical and wonky. So the difference, the main difference is that the regional board and the DTSC deal with all different kinds of contamination. And so they have screening levels and they assume no, it's called bioattenuation. So the good thing about petroleum hydrocarbon contamination is that it naturally biodegrades. It naturally breaks down. It will get better with typical soil conditions. It will get better over time. That's not the case with dry cleaning chemicals or other chemicals. So the reason we have these state guidelines specifically for underground storage tank cases is because it takes into account this natural breakdown of petroleum hydrocarbon contamination over time. So that's why we're doing different screening levels. And that's why we have one point out of 17 that exceeds for diesel, but we still meet the underground storage tank criteria.
And in terms of just following up on Vice Mayor Flores' question, in terms of removing that contaminated soil, we are going to remove that contaminated soil.
Yeah, that lead impacted soil is coming out. So yeah, that's the only. Again, that's in the buried structure. The superficial soil is fine as far as the lead concentrations are concerned, and the city has decided that they want to take that out. Even though it's buried at depth and nobody would be able to come into contact with it, like technically it's safe and it's not required to remove that to develop it into a park, the city wants to take that out so that the elevated lead concentrations are completely gone from
And
the
do
site.
we retest to see in terms of if there's any residue or in terms?
Well, in this case, because it's all contained in this buried concrete structure, we're just going to remove the soil that's in there. And then it's not like there's additional soil underneath. It's concrete. So
Because it's concentrated in the area.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we'll just remove everything that's in that concrete.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. My question now is going to be about traffic flow. So I don't know if that's Philip or.
Or could I just ask a follow-up question?
Sure, go ahead.
So what happened
You're the mayor.
between 2021 to 2023?
I don't know that, well, not much.
Specifically,
are you Yeah.
asking it?
Right, because the 2021 environmental site assessment showed that there is diesel and lead chemicals in the soil vapor, right? But then in 2023, soil testing concluded it was safe to use. So what happened between 2021 and 2023?
Oh, okay, I think it is me. I thought it was on the city side. The sampling that was done in 2021 was pretty limited. They only collected a few samples, and we collected samples across the whole site. In the environmental, the comprehensive environmental report, there's a figure that shows all the different sampling locations. So you can have a bit of variety, variability in, spatial locations. But we did target areas where the USTs were. So I think it's just a matter of having more data. I don't think that it necessarily changed. But yeah, they only sampled, the 2021 study only collected one sample. And then we collected 16. So it gives a better characterization of the site overall.
Right, so the 2023 study is the more robust soil sample test, correct?
Yes, the sampling that was done in 2023 and in 2024 collected far more samples than was collected in 2021.
All right, thank you.
If I can go back to my traffic flow question here. So I read the traffic study, so I actually enjoy reading traffic studies. The level of service, when we do, I guess, the hammerhead, if we choose that direction, it said the level of service currently right now is an A and a B, meaning that there's easy access and flow for traffic because there is access on Pine. And it said if we closed it off, it would still be able to be around an A and a B. I guess I have a hard time believing that because now you are having traffic flow to the surrounding streets. I guess I'm trying to understand how that is. Again, in the traffic board, it said he would be able to, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Accommodate the extra traffic. But I'm looking at it in terms of when you close off a street, you do have additional traffic, and it becomes a little harder for access for people to get around. And then you also have the businesses on the other side who potentially might lose customers because it's difficult when they don't have a direct access to it unless we go to the other option, right? I'm just trying to figure out like how the level of service question, how does that still remain as an A and a B?
So one, I might bring in Tricia to help with the transportation study who did that more robust study there. But I'm wondering if you're mixing the level of service from emergency access, or are you talking about just traffic flow?
Just traffic flow in general.
Okay.
Because on the study, it said level of service around the park is A and B and would accommodate additional traffic. It says closing Pine would, I said for myself, I said closing Pine would cause traffic to be diverted to Aspen in California. Again, now you have more cars going through that area, and I don't understand in terms of the level of service how it would still be an A and B, because now you have more additional cars there. Would it cause more traffic in that flow of area?
Okay.
Yeah.
I am going to bring in Tricia, who is our transportation consultant. Can I ask through the clerk, can you promote Tricia?
Yes.
Great.
This is Tricia Dudula with Hexagon Transportation Consultants. So our traffic analysis was based on existing conditions, looking at, again, when I say existing conditions, we looked at traffic levels in 2019. We compared them to when we did the traffic study in 2023, and our analysis of the traffic volumes in the area showed that the traffic has not yet resumed to what it was like before the pandemic. So we took like the more conservative, the higher volumes from 2019 to look at the existing traffic operations on the streets and intersections around the project site. And based on our analysis, the level of service we looked at both the AM and PM peak hour levels of service and also the average daily traffic on the surrounding streets. And our analysis shows that under existing conditions, which is like 2019 conditions, the traffic operations are acceptable at LOS A or LOS B. And what we determined is most of the intersections or the traffic levels in this area, the roads are operating below capacity. Therefore, with what we said, like with the closure of the Linden and Pine intersection, there would be some traffic diversions to the parallel streets of Aspen and California Avenue. And because the current intersections are operating at LOS A or LOS B, even with the traffic diversion from the closure of Pine and Linden, the impacts would not be significant. So there's like this additional capacity to basically accommodate that traffic that would be diverted to these surrounding streets.
So I just want to make sure I got it right. So based upon what you're seeing in terms of traffic patterns, it's not at the same level as it was previously, pre-COVID. And that
right.
if that street were to be closed, Aspen and California would be able to take on additional vehicles traveled in that space.
Yes, that's correct.
And it would still be an A and B level?
Well, no, I mean, we don't know that. We have not looked at traffic diversions yet.
Right.
So based upon how they are operating right now, we concluded that the impacts from the closure would not be significant. And based on the existing operating levels of the surrounding streets, there's adequate capacity to accommodate the diverted traffic.
No, I guess I understand in terms of it can handle additional capacity. Mm-hmm. I guess when you're adding, again, these are seconds to people's drive time, but that matters to people in terms of trying to get around. And so it becomes more of a convenience for people, an inconvenience for folks when they add another 30 seconds a minute in terms of the traffic. And so, we're still kind of, we're still steps away from before we get where we want to be. I would like to have the community drive this conversation in terms of what the design is. And I think as we have more and more conversations, I would really like to hear from the community in terms of, does the alleyway make more sense because there is a flow of traffic for people to get through? Because once you close it off, right? And now that changes traffic patterns for that entire neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm going to be listening to what the neighborhood wants, but I am a little bit concerned in terms of traffic flow there. And then just remind me, Philip, the Hammerhead section, is that parking as well, or is this just a turnaround, right?
It's just a turnaround.
Okay.
So that if an emergency vehicle needs to attend to an emergency and then after that make a turnaround, they can use that space. So
it could be a drop-off as well area? Like someone can drop off their kids to play?
That could be explored. It wasn't something that seemed desired from the community. And one other point I'd like to make is through our community engagement process, we heard that traffic on Pine is a concern, that people speed down that road, that it's dangerous for a lot of people living there, so that there was a desire from a lot of the community to reduce that.
Okay.
So having either the hammerhead or, if it's only one-way direction through the bypass alley, that would help address a lot of those concerns too.
Well, like I said, and I'll obviously take direction in terms of Vice Mayor Flores, in terms of his district, but the community is going to help us drive this conversation in terms of the design, so I will be listening very closely in terms of what their needs are. So thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
Questions?
May I ask the geologist some questions? So we know that lead is naturally occurring in the environment and that 15 to 400 parts per million. And so all these things that you're giving us are levels, but I think we have heard in here before that there was someone who asked, would you let your children play there? If you have children, would you let your children be there, and would you feel comfortable having your children be in that park?
I don't have children, but if I did, yes. Again, that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure to test for. That wasn't even a requirement in the state underground storage tank criteria that we were looking at, but that was something that we looked at and we said, we've identified that lead is an issue at this site, perhaps. It's been identified in the past, and this is going to be used as a park. So the responsible thing to do is to check shallow soil, for lead, and so we did that. And so again, in the shallow soil, absolutely, there are no issues with lead. The concentrations are at or below 80.
And what's the possibility of that, surfacing?
Oh, there's none. Yeah, this is again. It's in this structure it's 3 to 6 feet down. So no, it would be fine. It's effectively capped, but again, the city wanted to make sure that was removed because it's been identified as an elevated level.
Because we know that area really does need a green space, but we don't want to give them just a green space. We want to make sure that everybody will be safe. Now, someone talked about the community engagement or the plan, right? That we may be going into, there is already an alternative that we're favoring, right?
You saw the slide where we evaluated concept A and B, and they came in very close. So what we're doing is continuing to assess the feedback we had through these design alternatives phases, plus what we hear from council, and doing some additional conversations with engineering and other groups to understand which of these provide the most amenities for the community. So I wouldn't say that there's, just because one was a couple percentage higher, that's going to be the one that we select.
How much more can that be affected by more community engagement?
I don't know that community engagement. We heard from the community that it was pretty split, and we did a pretty robust community engagement process, really tailored towards how this community would have the best opportunity to provide input.
So in terms of making that decision, will it be just a decision of cost and whatever is good for that area based on the traffic impact and safety?
Because we did hear comments about each of those and what people preferred with one or the other. So we'll evaluate all of that and determine which of these meets the best needs for the community. Also factoring in if we are incorporating a restroom into the site and what trade-offs we would need to make with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was hoping to, I appreciate the Vice Mayor's attempt to allay the fears. And unfortunately, when it comes to lead and some of the horror stories that have come in from other parts of the country where children have been affected by the negligence of government, I understand why people are really super sensitive to this. But we've had a number of professionals here, and I'm satisfied with the answers. And at this point, I want to kind of focus on the wonderful aspects that this park brings to Linden Avenue and the neighborhood as a whole. And Mark, I'm not going to worry about a few seconds travel time, because if that was your concern, we probably shouldn't have built the hundreds of condominiums we did in the immediate area. But back to what we're doing there, you know, on Grand Avenue, we have a tremendous green space, the Civic Center, which is really kind of the showpiece for Grand Avenue, the business district. And there was a previous economic and community development director that said someday he thought that Linden Avenue, by its very nature, would rival Grand Avenue as far as the economic vibrancy of it. And one of the things that Linden has that Grand Avenue doesn't is it's not a wind tunnel. It's much more pleasant if you walk Linden Avenue in the afternoon, you don't get blown off the sidewalk. So I'm really, when I see the design, I'm glad that B includes the plaza, the central plaza. And this is kind of more of a formal scape, but when you're looking at a park in a downtown area like that, the plaza really should be the center feature of the park land. And it does look a little large to me, but I'll let others figure out what's the proper size. But I think that it's going to be, for Linden Avenue, it'll be kind of a showstopper, a moment in time that's different from the other businesses and residents, just the way the Civic Center is on Grand Avenue. So I'm excited by this, and I'm just not seeing the downside.
Thank you, Council Member. Through the mayor, one more point that I wanted to confirm and underscore. Director Midiotti, if you could come up. Thank you, Philip. Down the block from Pine, from where this is proposed, Cypress Lot parking or park is there. Are there any plans to get rid of that park, or to turn it into parking lot or something else? Or are there plans to enhance it and bring it about and make it even kind of an annex of what this project will be?
Certainly, yes, there are no plans to remove it from our inventory of parks, and we are studying ways in which we can enhance it now. We have heard through this community process a lot of desire to further study this, and so either as part of our Park and Rec master plan or conversations with the City Council, we're going to look at different strategies to use our park fees to improve this site. Of course, there are other sites in the town that have a tremendous amount of need for parks, but we understand that this is also a high priority location for
a high priority, and we're starting off, correct me if I'm wrong, or Madam City Manager, with ADA in order to get, can you walk us through that in order to get funding? What is it?
Right. It's on the back side of the park. Due to the fact that it's elevated, ADA access has been an issue for many years. So we would improve the access at the back of the park, and that would also improve our ability to apply for grants. And as we know, this is very ripe for grant funding, given the circumstances around this park, and we were successful in getting grant funding for the Linden Park, and I think it's very likely, if not park fees. We're fortunate to have park fees to use as a match, so we are definitely, and have been for a long time, very interested in upgrading Cypress and Pine.
So this is on the list of potential future funding for parks improvements and on that. It's not a neglected, forgotten, we're going to never open it again type of park.
It definitely needs some TLC. There's no doubt about that. We're very aware of that. And so it's very high on our list. But again, we'll, as we do every year, we'll come to council with the CIP proposals, and the council can decide how to prioritize those projects.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before we go to public comment, I do have a few comments. You know, I think it's important that we let the community know and that we are transparent. I think the data is very clear, and thank you to our environmental scientists for being here and allaying our fears and letting us know what the data shows. And I think the data really, really is clear. And I think, you know, what we need to do now is just be proactive, be transparent, and really inform the community. I know that there are folks who care about their safety and their kids' safety, and it's important for us to be proactive and to go out there. And I think, you know, something that we should do is, you know, I know it's already on the website, but, you know, continue to push this information out there on our social media channels. I think what might be helpful is we put up a physical board at the location of the future park and just let people know, like, look, this is all the data and this is the plans of what's going to be there. I think that would be very helpful. I think, Yeah. Do you have
Can I comment on those
Go ahead.
comments that you had? One is that we did, at the start of this project, we installed kiosks and like sort of bulletin boards at the site so we could specifically communicate to the members of the community who don't go online, who aren't on reading emails. So this information we've been posting there, so we'll continue to post more of this information. So that those are there, they're waterproof, this material can stay there and handle the weather. And then the other thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna post the video of this council meeting onto our webpage. So for people who weren't able to come tonight or didn't watch it directly, they can hear what we've heard from our environmental scientist as well. And we'll do a Spanish translation of that too.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
That's great. And then the only, and so it looks like both alternatives are both very exciting. And so I don't mind which one we pick. I just know whatever we pick will be great. And that, you know, the downtown community has really been needing a park that they can be proud of for a long time. I'm glad it's going to happen. I do want to say, though, I have talked with some members of the Bay Area Calisthenics group, and I know we've been putting workout equipment, fitness equipment at our various parks, but what they're looking for is something as simple as a pull-up bar. And so if we could include just a few sets of pull-up bars, I think that would be very much appreciated by that group.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that both of the designs do include a sort of fitness area. So, you know, that's what's planned to be there. Again, if we are to incorporate a restroom, that could, that might be one of the trade-offs, but we'll have something to work through still. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I believe we can move on to public comment.